What's up, everybody? This is Passion 9. Big news dropped this past week. We had the latest PlayStation 5 showcase, and I didn't know exactly what to expect. I think, like a lot of people, the price, finally getting the price of the console, the release date, all that stuff was kind of like, I guess the thing that we all were expecting by this point. But as far as game related stuff, I really didn't know what else they could pull out at this point. I didn't know, aside from maybe more launch titles, what we were going to find out here. And not much. Most of the showcase was devoted to further footage of games that were already announced, which, don't get me wrong, was mouthwatering stuff. Especially the Demon Souls gameplay footage. That looks really good. But aside from that, there was one big thing that kicked off the entire showcase, because that's just been Sony this year, I guess. They just like to hit the ground running with that Final Fantasy XVI announcement trailer. And boy, that one took me by surprise, because like a lot of people, I'm sure, the first thing that came to my mind when that trailer started was, okay, is this an expansion pack for Final Fantasy XIV? Because right away I recognized the art style, the medieval setting just looked more, like something out of Final Fantasy XIV, which I did play a couple years back. I played it for like 2 months or so. I'm not a big fan of MMOs in general, but I'll admit I stuck with that one longer than any other MMOs I've tried. But they're not really my thing, so I didn't stick with that game. But the one thing that did stick with me was the beautiful art direction. Like, to me, 14 was frustrating because even though it was an MMO, it was everything I wanted aesthetically from a Final Fantasy game. Like the setting, the world design, the races, and the way of the look of the world, to me, was just like everything I want from a modern Final Fantasy game. Like, I was getting so tired of, as much as 15 tried to shake things up and did provide some interesting stuff here and there, I was very disappointed with that one overall. And I've just been kind of very iffy with the franchise since, I want to say, like, the past 20 years. Like, I've been very on and off with it. And 14, again, was, like, frustrating, because it's like, why can't we just get a mainline entry that looks like this, that just has this world, that of the world of Ivalice? Why can't it just be like this? And surely enough, when that trailer dropped, that was my first, my first assumption was, this is somehow connected to 14. It's either a spin-off project that's like in the same thing, or it's some kind of expansion pack, or it's a next-gen sequel MMO that's just doing more of the same shit. No, it's a mainline entry. As soon as I saw the combat, I was like, that is not MMO combat. Like, you're jumping around. It looks like Devil May Cry combat, and surely enough, I've learned recently that, the lead combat designer, apparently, behind Devil May Cry 5 and Dragon's Dogma, is behind Final Fantasy XVI's combat, so hallelujah to that. I've been saying this for years, since games like Dragon's Dogma, or even Nier Automata, honestly. Why can't we get a Final Fantasy game with combat, real-time combat this good? Like, why is this so hard to do now? Like, here it is, and it looks amazing. It looks fucking incredible. To see combat like that in a Final Fantasy game that also has such a throwback sort of medieval setting that kind of reminds me of the really early games, like Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, and 4. Very medieval, very high fantasy, but with all of those, like, unique Final Fantasy elements. The summon creatures, Shiva looked amazing, and you've got the giant golems and Ifrit and all that. And all that's there. The chocobos are back to being like stallions, like steeds that are rode in war, and they look amazing, and I'm sure they'll probably be factored into the gameplay somehow. And it just looks so good. Like so simple in so many respects because Final Fantasy games, for so many years, the mainline entries have been so like kind of experimental. Like Square just didn't quite know what to do with this stuff for so many years. Whether it's like 13's extreme linearity or 15's boy band road trip adventure, whatever the fuck that was. And finally, they're just like, yeah, you know what? Let's just go back to making a Final Fantasy game. Let's just make a Final Fantasy game. It's about time. We're due for a Final Fantasy game. Let's give the fans a Final Fantasy game. Thank you, Square Enix. You make me happy. This looks like Final Fantasy. It looks amazing. And the fact that it is sort of a return to form in the setting, but is also moving forward with this combat, is like, oh god, this is everything I want. This is everything I wanted 15 to be. You know what I mean? And it's like, the fact that the same designers, the same team, I think it's called Unit 3, the same team that saved Final Fantasy XIV from its really bad launch and made that into, like, you know, one of the best MMOs out there, is working on this game. The same great team behind that setting and the story behind that game are working on this mainline entry. And it's like, I couldn't ask for a better, more hyped reveal. Like, it just looks so good. And the fact that we did get gameplay and we did get some intriguing story stuff, I'm already super pumped for this. Because, again, Final Fantasy is a series that has always frustrated me. I mean, we have had the Final Fantasy VII Remake, of course, which was coming out. And one of my big fears was that we wouldn't see another mainline numbered entry for, like, who knows how many years, because they're still going to be releasing these episodic Final Fantasy VII games. So another fear I had was like, oh, Nomura is just going to rule Final Fantasy with this remake crap for who knows how long. And I still haven't played the FF7 remake or whatever, and I don't know when I'll get around to that because I'm still very iffy on that whole project. But one thing I will say is that if they keep going like they are now, they're doing 16, you know, they can remake the hell out of 7. I don't care what they do with that, because I want new. I want fresh. I want this series to push forward and do new shit. Like, as much of a throwback as this is in some respects, with that setting or whatever, it looks more progressive than Final Fantasy has been in a long time. You know what I mean? Like, more forward, like, more evolved. Like, it looks like the sort of shakeup that the series has needed for the longest time. Even though 15 was kind of being regarded as that, I call complete bullshit on it, because to me 15 was like the biggest blunder Square has put out, despite how well it sold and, you know, despite it having its fans. I thought that game was a jumbled mess. Even 13, for all of its problems, I thought was more polished and, like, at least cohesive, even if I didn't like that one either. So here it is, at long last. They've smartened up. They're doing what Capcom's doing, which is like, we'll remake some of this, some of our old stuff here, but we're still gonna do something new and exciting here. It's like, yeah, please, like, don't live in the freaking past. I'm tired of the remakes and shit. Give me new, evolve this franchise, and honestly, it has the potential to be like one of the, not only the best Final Fantasy game in over 20 years, but maybe one of the best JRPGs in who knows how long. I mean, with a team like that behind it, with the DMC5 director or a combat designer doing the combat, I'm like, this looks lit. It looks so cool. And I like the darker, kind of edgier tone they're going for. I still hope there's some of that classic Final Fantasy lightheartedness in there, but I like how sort of harder edge this looks, you know. And what can I say? I'm actually hyped for Final Fantasy XVI. It's not something I thought I'd be saying so soon. Not only for a new numbered title, but for anything new from Final Fantasy, because as much praise as the FF7 remake has been getting from a lot of people, I've been very iffy on that whole thing. You know, I'm kind of like, I'm just like, why remake what was already one of the best games in the series and was a classic and is fantastic, and they're and remaking it in a very strange way where they're chopping it up into pieces and selling it that way, and it's like, no, take these amazing graphics, take these exciting new combat mechanics you're coming up with, put them in a new game, please. And that seems to be the road they're taking. So I am super hyped for FF16. I'm a big Final Fantasy guy for, you know, the series Golden Age, and I'm hoping this will be a return to that. So for me, that was the showcase. Like, that's the big takeaway. I thought maybe I'd have more of an overview of an overall summary of the showcase itself, but really that's the discussion here for me. That's the big takeaway as a Final Fantasy fan. I even have this Yoshitaka Amano art book here, the Final Fantasy illustrator. I love his works. So I have, like, you know, this art book here of all of his cool stuff. Cool book. Recommend it if you like Amano stuff. He's done a lot of cool things. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. Are you as excited for FF16 as I am? The PS5 is looking more interesting to me, despite the steep price points we're looking at here. I mean, that's always the case, I suppose. But man, it's got some titles to look forward to. I guess as a quick aside, the fact that Demon's Souls is in fact going to be a launch title, the remake of Demon's Souls, has me pumped as well. It's very tempting to pick this thing up at launch if you've got the dough, but even as unlikely as that is for me, I'm still super hyped for the future of this console, and you know, when I do dive in there. So that's all I got to say about that showcase and FF16. Till next time, guys, live for the passion.